Okay, so you were here for the AI and computer science session, and we are going to talk about how to use AI and computer science for K-5 and a little bit for 6 through 8. A lot of the things that I'm going to share with you today can be adapted to go through 6 through 8 as well as probably up into high school. So I am Hannah England. I am a computer science teacher in Gwinnett County Public Schools. I teach kindergarten through 5th grade, and this is just a few things about me. That's my husband, Connor, and then my 2 puppies, Abigail and Lexi. So we're going to start with some opening questions in the chat because I want to make sure I know we're virtual. We're not going to get to talk like we would normally do. So I'm going to ask a few questions in the chat to get to know y'all a little bit better and so we can start off today. So number 1 is what and where do you teach? What and where do you teach? And I can't see the chat, so I'm going to stop sharing for a second and see if I can figure out how to do that. All right, what and where do you teach? Computer science at Carnegie Mellon University. Computer science or science coordinator. What and where do you teach? Or if you don't teach, what do you do? Why did you come to this computer science summit today? There's someone from Florida, computer science and technology. Chicago, y'all are all over the place. Robotics, CS, STEM teacher, 5th through 8th grade. Awesome. Okay, our second question is, have you taught or used AI in your CS classroom? Have you taught or used AI in your CS classroom? Not yet. A couple no's. Ooh, college level video game design. VR for K3 to K7. Very cool. Have all different kinds of experience. And then the last question to start us out, if you haven't used AI, how comfortable do you feel like jumping into it? Or if you have used it, how do you feel, again, how do you feel using AI? Like, what's your comfort level? Ready to jump in? I see some of us piloted, ready to try. Eagerly welcome. Awesome. Okay, so today, can y'all hopefully still see? I'm kind of jumping back and forth because I only have one screen in front of me, but hopefully y'all can still see that session. So our session goals today are to learn about what is AI, how do we teach or use AI in our computer science classrooms, and then I'm excited to share lots of resources and lesson ideas that I've used or that I've found so that y'all can use them in your classrooms. So first, what is AI? I love this quote. We've used this in our school quite a bit. Ignoring AI is the equivalent to ignoring the internet in the late 20th century and ignoring social media a decade ago. So things that have overcome our world and we use every single day, AI is going to be one of those things. So we're going to start off with a short video on what is AI.
What will a world with artificial intelligence be like? Just look around you. AI isn't the future, it's here now. While only 33% of people think they're using AI, nearly 77% already are. AI recommends the right movies to watch, stops criminals from using our credit cards, and interprets what we mean to say when we talk into our smart speakers. Today's students are the first generation to grow up with AI. Artificial intelligence can already do many things that once only humans could do, like reasoning, adapting, recognizing patterns, and solving complex problems. By 2025, AI will take over more than half of all current work tasks. Employees in every industry will soon work side by side with smart machines to become more efficient and productive. And AI has the power to help us solve some of our biggest problems, like climate change, education inequality, and improving global health. But who will decide which problems AI should solve? How will we ensure our AI systems are ethical and fair? Who will decide whether AI works for us or we work for it? Our ability to answer these questions will determine the quality of our future lives. To design an AI-powered world we will actually want to live in, today's students must know how to do more than just use AI. They need to know how to harness it to create solutions that will improve lives. This won't happen on its own. Teachers are the most important link to developing the new generation of AI-savvy learners, workers, and leaders. Across the globe, students and teachers are beginning to learn about AI together. They're exploring the capabilities of existing AI tools, building their own applications, and considering what rules are needed to keep us safe. They're also learning that the more AI can perform transactional tasks, the more important our uniquely human skills like empathy, creativity, and critical thinking will become. AI is already here, and our students need to be ready. By learning to create with AI, today's students will change the world in ways we can't yet imagine. Are you ready to help students create the kind of AI-enabled world we will all want to live in? Are you ready to teach the future?
All right, so starting off with, there we go. Starting off with a quote, as most hot topics, there is no one definition for artificial intelligence that everyone agrees on, but this is kind of the consensus that most people have. AI is the science and engineering of making intelligent machines, especially intelligent computer programs. So I know most of us are teachers, or we work in a field where data is very important. So taking a look at data to start out, and again, all of these are estimates found with different resources, but it is estimated that 85 million new AI jobs will be created in the next 2 years. A third of the American workforce will have to change occupations due to these artificial intelligent machines. And I thought this was interesting. It said 38% of people currently think they use artificial intelligence, but about 77% of us use AI in our daily lives. So in the chat, what areas do you think you currently use AI, whether it's in your school or your workplace? Where do you see AI already around you? And I finally have the chat up so I can see both at the same time. At school, like what things do you think of when you think of AI? Banking, Siri, Cortana, Alexa, Google Home, absolutely. Every time Google serves me an ad, yes. Making our smart homes too, like we have smart thermostats, different devices in our homes that use artificial intelligence technology. Absolutely. So if we go on, here's a little bit more data talking about the school system. So this chart right here in the middle, the pie chart, thinking about the COVID-19 pandemic, this is what percentage of administrators or district leaders who thought AI would become more important over the next couple years. So that blue bar, that light blue bar, I think that's 48% says that we will increase a little bit in our use of AI or stay about the same, but very few of us recognize that AI is not going to be a part of our lives over the next few years. And then thinking about the way we use AI. This was a survey of the ways teachers use AI in their classrooms. So things like flagging potential security risk or dangerous sites at this district or school level, personalizing tools that use data to adapt curriculum to students' needs, and even things like preventing or noticing when students are in danger of failing academically or not meeting the standards that are set forth. AI or machines that are here and we're already using them in our classrooms, even if we don't realize it. So moving on into how we teach AI and what we're supposed to be teaching our students, or what we can teach our students about a world that they will grow up in. This is the AI framework, the 5 big ideas for the AI for K-12 initiative. So it has 5 different categories on the ways that we should teach students about AI. So the first one is perception. Computers perceive the world using sensors. So teaching students that AI machines have sensors, they have senses, they are able to see, they're able to hear based on the type of machine that's created. And then they're able to make decisions based on that perception. So for example, if you pick up your phone and you're doing facial recognition, your phone is actually able to perceive your facial features and then make a decision or reason based on what it sees. And then moving into the machine learning, number 3, computers can learn from data. So we started off with AI being more of a programming them steps by steps to make the decisions. Whereas now we know AI machines can learn a little bit more from the data that we give it. And we're going to talk a lot about different resources later that use machine learning. And then number 4, natural interaction. So using machine learning or artificial intelligence has to have some way to naturally interact with humans. So we're creating AI machines that are able to communicate or able to interact. It has to have a user interface that so that it is recognizable for humans. And then finally, societal impact. AI impacts society in both positive and negative ways, and teaching students that it's important to evaluate whether a certain AI, or I guess the benefits and the cons of different AI machines on society. So thinking about those five key ideas that we're teaching our students: perception, representation and reasoning, learning, interaction, and societal impact. Which one do y'all think is the most important for students to learn? When we're using this in our classrooms, which one is most important? Number 5, societal impact. Absolutely. Thinking about how, social impact, how artificial intelligence is going to impact us in our daily lives, and having students recognize the positives and the drawbacks of AI. So I'm going to share this presentation with y'all in the chat later. But everything is linked. So when you click on this, it takes you to the AI for K-12 Big Ideas framework, so that you can actually go through and read all about all of these things. So you'll have those resources. So jumping into teaching AI. These are the computer science standards for from ISTE. I know that most of y'all are probably very familiar with these standards. We're teaching students to become empowered citizens. We want them to create their own learning and to problem solve and to be ready for the world that they're going to grow up in. So we want them to be able to be creative, to think critically, and to influence the world around them. So how does AI play a part in these CS standards that we already use every single day? The CS overlap, it's honestly so big to it's hard to put into words how many different things that overlap between AI and computer science, but these are the biggest areas that I found. The AI CS overlap in computer systems, programming, computation, data science, data structures and algorithms, software development, and ethics. And I know that even as just like planning computer science lessons, it's easy to see where all of these different AI machines fit into the content area. So that's what we're going to dig into today. And I'm going to show you some examples of how you can teach AI in your classroom. So remember, I teach K-5, so some of my examples, I have to start very basic with kindergartners who really never experienced, or they've experienced it, but they haven't really put a name to the phrase, and then going into a little bit more complex. So starting off, when we talked about AI with my students, I opened a Google Doc and just started sharing with them different things that you could do that show examples of artificial intelligence. So I'm going to show you kind of the first thing that I did with my students. And let me share that page real quick. Let's see. Okay, so the first thing that I did is I opened up a Google Doc and I was like, okay, I'm going to type in something and I want you to watch what happens. So I would start by saying like, what is, so what type, there we go. What is, and I was like, I'm going to say artificial intelligence, but I don't know how to spell artificial. So let me sound it out. Art, oh, I know that word, art, I. Look what happened. So I kind of went through saying, okay, first of all, the computer guesses what it thinks you're going to type. And then moving into, okay, if I didn't know, if I didn't see that, if I wanted to keep going and I kept typing artificial, I know the word fish. So what if I typed in fish? Oh. And then looking at what happens there, the computer already autocorrects the word for you, so you don't even have to go back in. It says, okay, Miss England is trying to write artificial, so I'm going to fix it for her. And then even after that, going back in, if I'm like, nope, that's not the way I want to spell it, I want to spell it like this, and I keep typing, we can see that when we go back to it, there'll be an underline, and when we click on that, Google gives suggestions on what it thinks you're trying to type. So you already have AI working through spell check, predictive text, all those things like that. So the students kind of begin to see that, okay, this is something that we do use in everyday life. This is something that we see whether we are chatting with our friends or we're looking something up on the computer. Artificial intelligence is always at work. And then even going into letting students practice with the voice text. So in Google Docs, there's the voice typing, and then it's very simple for students to use. You can say, hey, my name is Miss England, period. And then students can kind of start to see how your voice is being picked up by this type of artificial intelligence and then being typed into the computer. So that's usually where I start when I'm talking about AI with my students, just to give them very basic examples. Even on when we're doing like research and things like that, they can, when they start to type in, whether it's in Google or a database that we use through our county, they can start to see AI start to guess what they're thinking. So kind of letting the students explore with that first. And then jumping into, oh my goodness, does not want to load for me. Just more basic examples of AI. So thinking things like Google Maps and letting students kind of go through Google Maps and click through. So for example, if we are in Georgia and we want to go to Texas, they're actually able to go into Google Maps and type in Texas, search for it, and then they will see how the different routes pop up. You can choose your starting point. Usually we just go broad, and then it'll show you the different routes that you can take. So students are able to see, you can have those conversations about how is AI making those decisions based on where to go? What is it looking at? Is it looking at traffic? Is it looking at distance? Things like that. And then even noticing that it tells you this route has restricted usage or things like that. So this is another small example I use with my students to get them kind of thinking about AI. as well as I found this really cool resource. I know that there's so many different translators out there, but this one was really nice for students and easy for students to use, where they can just type in. It actually already has what I typed in earlier. So it detects the language, and you can talk about how AI is actually paying attention to the language that you're using as you're typing it in. I know when I started to type in hello, I guessed German at first, so then it was translating it back to English, and the more I typed, the more it understood what I was trying to say, and it was able to more easily detect that language. So translating from English into another language here. So those are just some really basic examples to start off with for students. And then even thinking, those unplugged activities, kind of gathering images, a bunch of different images of different items. So like a dog and a human, for example. And first having students sort those examples into different categories. So you have all of the dogs in one category, all the people in one category, and that's a pretty easy sort for most students. And then coming up with a list of rules that would categorize those different people. So for example, a dog has fur, or a dog has a more defined nose or ears on the top of their head, or things like that. And then whereas humans have longer hair, or they have hair, they have, they're wearing clothes, different things like that. And then showing students more images, like over here on the right, this dog, well, it's obviously a dog to us, but if AI is using those list of rules to make a decision, is it going to pick up a dog, or is it going to pick up a human based on those rules? We see him standing on 2 feet instead of 4 legs. So it might be more easily classified as a human. Or looking at the picture down here on the right, the lady with the cat ear headphones on, she looks like she has ears on the top of her head. So is she going to be classified as a human, or is she going to be classified as a dog based on the rules that we created? So that's a very simple unplugged activity, kind of getting students to think about how AI works, how it recognizes images, and then how it classifies new images based on the existing data set. So then going a little bit further into learning about AI, this is Tic-Tac-Toe versus AI, probably one of my kids' favorite activities. I will say that I had to preface with my younger kids that if you don't win, it's okay. That just means you're a really good teacher. So they all get kind of discouraged that AI beats them almost every single time, or they tie. And I'm like, no, you're just teaching AI really, really well. So this activity is pretty cool. Where if you haven't seen it before, it is just you playing against AI, where you get to, when you make a decision, AI goes right after you, and it's making the next move based on what you did. So really, it says don't feel bad if you lose. Don't waste your time trying to win either, because you won't. So students can play. We even did this where students played against AI, and then they played tic-tac-toe against a partner, and they compared how many times they won against AI versus how many times they won against a partner, how many times they tied or lost. So students could kind of see that comparison between how quick AI learns and how it's able to make decisions versus a human, where you are both, there's no like set of rules that you're following. You're just completing the task at hand. So this is something that students really love. And then kind of going unplugged from that, there's this resource, the Intelligent Piece of Paper, where it's tic-tac-toe, but you have one person be the intelligent or the artificial intelligence. And it talks about first how just because something can't move or can't do something doesn't mean it's not intelligent. So thinking about like someone who's in a wheelchair, well, they can't get up and walk, but it doesn't mean they're not intelligent. They just have limited capabilities in what they can do. So they might have to have someone walk for them, things like that. So one person has this piece of paper with the rules that says, hi, I'm a highly intelligent piece of paper. Let's play noughts and crosses, or tic-tac-toe. And then it goes through the steps. I'm an X. I go first. I'm going to go in a corner. And then if the other player goes here, then do this. If the other player does this, then do this. So it kind of walks through, and you have students see how artificial intelligence works kind of compared to the computer when they play tic-tac-toe online, or if someone had those lists of instructions. It kind of gives them that basis for how AI is working, which is really cool. And then jumping into a couple of different games that my students have loved to look at or play with when thinking about AI. So the first one, this is probably the first thing that I was introduced to when looking at AI, is Quick Draw. So for this activity, the first thing I do is I show my kids the data set right here and talk about how many pictures, 50 million drawings, how many drawings people created. And you can click on it and look what the different name of that object is. So for example, a Band-Aid, and then you can see everyone who drew a Band-Aid. And then after going through that for a little bit, we play the game and I have them go through and do a couple. We do a couple together. I have a big screen, touchscreen TV in my room, so the students can actually come up and I'll have them like one at a time draw. And then we'll talk about which ones were harder for AI to guess, which ones were easier for AI to guess, and why that is. So if you haven't played it before, and I'm going to share all of these resources with you, and I'm going to let you have time to explore and everything. Oh my goodness, a flamingo is the first one. So you get 20 seconds. And I don't have my mouse with me either.
I see potato. Or moon.
So it's trying
or
to
balloon.
guess. Oh, that's
or mouse.
Beautiful.
Or hourglass. Oh, I know. It's flamingo.
So the AI tries to guess the different things that you're drawing in a certain amount of time. And so we talk about, like, if they don't guess it, why is that? Or if they do guess it, what features made it easier to guess? So that's a really fun activity that I know the kids love. And then this one is where the AI is guessing an animal or a character in under 20 questions. So it's a 20-question game. So when you play, you choose a theme. I will say this one is not as clean as the quick draw activity. This definitely has more like glitches and a little bit all over the place. But I usually tell my students to do an animal, and then they have to choose an animal in their head. I tell them to write it down too, so they don't change it. And then he will guess, or he will ask different questions, and you have to answer those yes, no, don't know, probably, or probably not. So can your animal be found in pet stores? Let's say I had a dolphin. I would say no. Does he have 4 legs? No. And he would go through the different questions, and it's amazing how fast, like, now the questions are kind of being tailored more towards my animal. Does your animal live in the sea? And is your animal bigger than a great white shark? Probably not. And so he's starting to get closer and closer to that final guess. And students love to see how he can guess your animal super quick. And then another AI game that my students have loved is the Magic Sketchpad. So this kind of works like Quick Draw, but the students are choosing a picture that they want to draw. So they could draw a calendar. And then as soon as their pencil lets go, or their computer mouse lets go, the computer tries to fill in their image. So if we have a calendar, we make a box for that calendar, and then the computer starts to fill it in with what they would think would come next. So you're actually drawing with the AI machine, which is pretty cool. And there's different options for students to use. All right, so I'm going to give y'all, I kind of threw a bunch of resources at you over the last few minutes. I'm going to let y'all get a chance to explore those different things. And actually, let me put the link in the chat real quick so that you have that. And we're going to take probably 5 minutes to explore, and then we'll come back together and share a little bit. All right, so that link is in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing to let y'all get to view some of those. Let's see. And I saw someone put in the chat that they work with high school. So it's cool to see computer science through an elementary school lens. So we'll sit for 5 minutes. I'm going to be here if you have questions on any of the activities. And then when we come back, I'll jump into some other resources, some more advanced ideas. As y'all are looking through, are there any resources that you've used before, any of them that you would like to learn more, any of them that you're excited to use? I see some people still adding in the chat where they're from. That's awesome. There's so many different people from all over the place. Use some, but not in an AI capacity as a learning target. I have noticed that a lot of these things are things that we use in our classrooms or that we've seen before, but we don't like make those connections to AI as much. So it's cool to get to actually make those connections. All right, one more minute to try out any of those that y'all want to, and then we will jump back in. Okay, so moving on to a few more advanced resources. So I know that we've kind of talked about the basics of having students explore things like spell check, predictive text, and then going into Google Maps or games and things like that. There are also definitely more advanced resources for teaching AI and computer science. And those are some of the ones that I'm going to show you now. So the first one that I love for all grade levels that we usually start with is AI for Oceans. Has anybody used AI for Oceans before through code.org? Awesome. Yay. I feel like this is like the go-to for teaching about machine learning, especially for younger kids. I do see some of us who haven't used it. So AI for Oceans is, like I said, through code.org. And it can be used with almost any grade level. So even things like with my kindergartners and first graders, we didn't do this individually, of course, but we kind of talked about it as a whole class, and they had just as much fun. And they even got to try working in partners. So with AI for Oceans, they walk you through a couple videos of what artificial intelligence is, what you are doing in this activity. But basically, you have this AI bot, and you have to teach him whether something is fish or it is trash. And so you're going through and you're teaching him by selecting different images. It doesn't want to load for me. I won't go through it because he's very loud. So I won't go through it, but it goes through and you have to sort it, fish versus trash. And then he goes through his own data set and you can see how well he did. And it brings up great conversations of, okay, how many pieces of data did he need to be successful? What are some things that he picked up on? If he didn't see that image before, would he be able to identify it appropriately? So just the very basics of AI and machine learning in here. And then it moves into where they have to decide, does it belong in the ocean versus doesn't belong in the ocean? So then you are introduced to different pictures like squid or dolphins or things like that. And AI doesn't recognize that as something that belongs in the ocean because your category has changed from fish to ocean. So then you have to reteach the machine or give the machine more data. And then finally it goes into, you get to choose a word to teach it, like red or blue or round or triangular, things like that. So you're actually teaching AI a new word. And then I forgot the last part, actually you teach him an opinion word. So like awesome or fierce or silly. And it talks about the bias in AI because the data we're giving it is based on our opinion and not based on like a fact. It's not rooted in facts. So then you can even talk about some of the pitfalls of using AI or the people who train AI, which is really cool. So that's an awesome resource. And then Google Teachable Machines. Has anyone used that before? In the chat, y'all can let me know. Awesome. I see Tiffany said she used AI for Oceans with 6th through 8th grade and they loved it too. That's definitely available for all kids. Even as adults, I've enjoyed it. So Google Teachable Machines is taking that AI for Oceans to the next level. So your students will actually get to train a teachable machine or an AI machine to identify a different object. So when you click in through Teachable Machine, we usually start with an image project, and I have 2 students partner up. And when you click on it, let's see, you can name your classes. So for example, we have like Sarah as the first one and John as the second one. And then you can open the webcam like on our Chromebooks or laptops, iPads, and they take pictures of themselves and give AI all the data that it needs. And the next person goes, and then they get to train their AI, train that teachable machine, and then test it out to see if it works. So this is really cool because you can talk about how we need a large amount of data for the teachable machine to be able to recognize certain things. Thinking about the types of images, do we have, if it's like a face, do you have all different angles of the face or like facial recognition on your cell phone? Do you know how the iPhone makes you like turn your head up and down all over? Do you have enough data that represents that type or all of those different pieces of it? Or if you have glasses on and you take those glasses off, will AI still recognize you? Well, that depends on the data that you've given it and things like that. So we use this with my kids, and honestly, we took a whole week just doing Teachable Machines because there was so many great conversations and so many things that kids brought up based on these different activities where we could easily fill a week in computer science. So this is another really awesome resource for machine learning. And then I haven't used these in my classroom before, but I found them and I really wanted to share. So has anybody seen the experiments by Google for this? I have bird sounds, NASA, and orchestra. Has anybody seen any of those in the chat? I hate that we're not in person. I hate not getting to hear from people. Okay, no, haven't seen it. So each one of these three that I chose are really awesome experiments by Google, where it goes through how they taught the machine to recognize certain things and the students can play with it. So for example, this is bird sounds, and I really love this one. So I'm gonna mute myself and let the video play so that y'all can learn about this. I'm gonna actually reshare. I believe I didn't share my audio. Can y'all see? I don't think that worked. Okay, there we go.
Hey, I'm Kyle.
Hi, Manny.
Hi, I'm Jessie from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology.
This is an experiment we made that uses machine learning to organize thousands of bird sounds into an interactive visualization.
Bird sounds can be really difficult to learn because there's so many species out there, and some of them sound really similar. And at times you might just need to be distinguishing between a note that slurs up or a note that, drops in pitch. And these can be really, really subtle differences.
This project started when we were talking to people at Cornell about how it might be interesting to apply machine learning to bird sounds. So we decided to try a little test with some of the sounds in our collection. We didn't give the computer any outside data or tags, or even tell it the birds' names. We wanted to see if it could just listen to the sounds and automatically learn its own way to organize them.
Bird songs vary a lot, so before we can look at them in the same space, we have to break down everything into short bursts of sound less than a second long. Then we group the sounds with a technique called T-SNE. First, the computer creates a fingerprint from each sound, which is like an image or a set of numbers that represents that particular sample. Then T-SNE compares all of these fingerprints and places similar sounds closer together. One way to think about T-SNE is that it's taking these fingerprints from a high-dimensional space, that space with more than 3 dimensions, and reducing them to 2 dimensions so that we can visualize it.
And our test worked pretty well. This is a map of the sounds that the computer created. You can see that it figured out how to group similar sounds from similar birds closer together. We also made it so that you can search for specific birds. We put it on the web for anyone to play with.
We certainly have a dream that someday you'd be able to put out a microphone in the Amazon with a recorder and have all the species, maybe not even just birds, identified, and we would be able to monitor species diversity at site through these automated recognition techniques. I think it's incredibly exciting to figure out what are those collaborations that we can make between computer science and ornithology or biology in general and start tackling some really exciting and challenging science and conservation questions.
Visit MacaulayLibrary.org for more resources.
We can't hear you, Hannah. You're muted. You're muted.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I don't think I would use this with K-5 students just because of the different vocab and the extensiveness of this activity. But there are this is a really cool resource to share or to let students kind of play with and get to see the different, the way the AI actually trained that data or learned that data and was able to organize it. So the experiment is actually on Google, and you are actually able to play around with it and see, which is really, really cool. So that's another resource. And then there's actually 3 of them that I shared. So there's the bird sound experiments with Google, the NASA, where they took a bunch of pictures that were taken from space and different things, and they let machine learning or the AI categorizes images. So that's this bottom picture right here, where you can go in and you can either search or you can click like Earth, and then it'll zoom in and show you all of the different pictures taken from space that are of Earth, or just all kinds of different things, different satellites, and really cool pictures. And then this last one right here, the orchestra experiments by Google, that's kind of a teachable machine that is interactive. So I could see you do this with my kids in my classroom. It lets you, I'll just put it up and show you. It lets you conduct your own orchestra. So it recognizes your hand movements. If you stand back from your computer with the camera, it will recognize you like conducting. So you can make it louder, you can make it softer, you can change the tempo and all kinds of different things. So even something like this connects to music or other content areas which are introduced to students. And then finally, the programming AKS, or programming standards kind of overlap with computer science significantly. And I know this is probably the most, oh no, the sound is not good. Y'all not hear me? Any better? No, I guess we haven't. Okay. Share my screen. That helps. Okay, can y'all hear me now? Is that any better?
It's a little bit better, but it's still not as good as it was.
Oh no.
Okay, there you go. It came back.
Okay, good. I don't know what is happening. Okay, so the programming standards, or the programming connection between artificial intelligence and computer science. I know this is probably the one that we use most often, or the one that we kind of go to when we're thinking about AI algorithms and programming and using steps in a sequence to get our AI machines to work. So I know that probably most of you have used Scratch and Scratch Junior, but I just wanted to put those on there, especially for K-5. These are both really awesome resources that we use all the time. And I know that in computer science we use them, but also making that connection to artificial intelligence and how machines work and how machines learn. And just being very intentional about what we say and how we use these in our classroom. So we only have about 10 more minutes, so I'm gonna keep going. I'm almost finished, and we'll explore at the end. But I just wanted to share a couple other activities for AI with K through 5 or K through 8 students. There is a Minecraft AI unit where it goes through and you are creating a machine that mimics human behavior. And it talks about the things that AI does well and the things AI doesn't do well. And then Printable Mazes. This is actually a resource that I found on a website that talked about how when you solve a maze at first, like if you give a kid a maze and they just try to solve it randomly, how long does that take? And then if you give them a rule, so like follow the left-hand side of the maze. So then they try the same maze again, or try a very similar maze, and they follow it on that left-hand side. How long did that take? And then having students try to figure out if there's a shorter route to follow, or a shorter route to get to the end, or get to the end of the maze. So talking to students through how AI has to make those decisions, or how they follow certain rules to be able to complete the maze, which is pretty cool, and that might be good for your lower students as well. And then I don't know why I started at the bottom, but Harold the Robot. This is a great activity for K-5 students as well, where you give you have one person be the robot and one person be the commander, and it talks about how a computer can only follow simple commands, or an AI can only follow simple commands. So if you have like blocks in front of you, the commander might say, pick up the block in the front, and so they would pick it up, or move the yellow block 2 spaces right, or something like that. And then how easy those commands are to follow, and then moving into something like stack the 3 blocks on top of each other in order from biggest to smallest, or something like that. And so thinking about how AI can follow simple commands, and but maybe not these more complex commands. So, questions before we finish up today. What activities do you see yourself using in your classroom? Any of these activities that you see yourself using? And Kathleen, yes, these slides are downloadable. I will share the link again at the end. But are there any that you're super excited to try out with your students, or to dig into yourself, or any of them that you're like, I'm not so sure about? Yes, I will share a downloadable link. Or are there any other resources or activities that you have used in your classroom that you really love? I know there's so much out there, but it takes a while to like dig into everything that's out there and choose what works for your students. Yes, the bird experiment was probably my favorite that I found. Oh, cool. Bookcreator.com. Similar to QuickDraw, where kids create their illustrations. Very cool. I'll have to check that out. Yes, AI for K-12 had so many resources. I'm going to finish up by actually sharing some of those additional resources. So I was learning about AI, and I know my students really didn't have a ton of information about AI. So I let them explore. I gave them some resources to go through, some different videos, articles, pictures, things like that, and let them learn everything they could about AI. And then we came back together and talked about it and shared out. So here's some really good articles and videos for kids if you want them to do like an guided inquiry about AI. And then those resources that y'all were talking about. I think all of these resources can be used really K through 12. I know I kind of think more K-5 because that's my area of expertise, or where I am every single day. But there are so many different resources that are available. Teachable Machine would be great. This resource right here, the IST Hands-on AI Project for the Classroom, this is phenomenal. I found it on the IST website. It's 52 pages of lesson plans and resources for kids about AI. So it goes through what AI does, training data, machine learning, senses, navigation AI, it even talks about bias and things like that. This has been the best thing that I've found, where I've pulled so many resources to use. So that is linked here. And then the AI for K-12, and then ISTE, all of those are really awesome. PBS also has a crash course in AI, which was really, really cool for adults and kids. So I'll put that link on there as well. All right, so I'm going to share the link. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to share the link in the chat, the downloadable link. But while I'm doing that, is there any other questions that y'all have for me? That downloadable link. I will say I am by no means an expert in artificial intelligence or computer science, but I'm so excited about all of this, and I just wanted to share.
Your enthusiasm showed, and it was really, really good. So no, great job. So yes, thank you for putting that the documents in the chat. We've gotten some really great comments. Please excuse my puppy in the background. But just wanted to let everyone know that we have a transition to the next, the concurrent panel sessions next. Those will start at 1:25. But again, Hannah, you did a really wonderful job, and just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you so much. Make sure that link works and let me know, just in case. But thank y'all so much for coming. I am so excited to get to share all of y'all with all of y'all, and I hope y'all enjoy the rest of the session.
And thank you so much.